Yeah, so let's get going. We've waited long enough. There are about 5 of you. It's not increasing the number. So let's see, for whatever it's worth, because we are already constrained for time. Anyway, last we met, we were discussing the analytic method of political thought. And the analytic method was used by Socrates, it was used by Pythagoras, it was used by Plato. And I was just informally discussing with you that everybody said that there is a perception that all Western philosophy and political philosophy is a footnote to Plato. So he definitely talked about analytics, but the real definition of analytic came from Aristotle. Okay, just like rhetoric came from Aristotle, so did analytic. We were talking about this the last time. And if you basically look at analytic method, there is a book written by Aristotle. I told you it's called Prior and Posterior Analytics. Okay, posterior analytics, I told you, is the analysis of something after it has happened. I had given you that example of a plane crash and how people reconstruct what might have happened in an analytical way and provide an explanation of what could have gone wrong. So that is posterior analytics. In Latin, this method is called a posteriori. Okay, A is one separate letter, and posteriori, P-O-S-T-E, R-I-O-R-I, posteriori. So that is what you will see in the posterior analytics. A priori is actually, A again is a separate letter. Priori, P-R-I-O-R-I. Some people call it priori and posteriori also, but that is a very, very rare thing. It is a posteriori and a priori. Priori is the rational component that we have, which makes us anticipate what can happen and how it can happen if we do something, if we actually do something. One second, please. Okay. If we actually if we actually ponder about what might happen. So let's put it this way. An a priori rationality will basically tell you that the speed at which I'm going, teaching this syllabus, it'll probably take 3 years or 4 years to complete the syllabus. Okay, because you're calculating the speed at which I'm going, how much of the syllabus have we covered, in how many classes. Now we have only half an hour to 40-minute classes, and these are being held only 3 times a week. And given the slow speed at which I'm going, it'll take a long time. So that's what will become a priori, your ability to gauge something before it happens. Okay, so that is also a rational method. Okay, all these methods that you see are all rational. And this is also a rational method. But if you come to the modern period, and I don't want to talk about it now in at length, I'll just make a mention of it, because you have to understand that there is another use of a priori, and this use of a priori gained currency mainly during Immanuel Kant's writings. Okay, I mean, when in the period which is actually called the German Enlightenment, which happened sometime in the 19th century, you have this great moral philosopher, Immanuel, Immanuel, Immanuel Kant, Kant. Immanuel Kant, he uses a priori in a slightly different fashion. I had mentioned this too. I said he calls it intuit. Okay, Intuit. Intuit or intuitive, which is extrasensory perception. Okay, because it is believed in the modern period, in the aftermath of John Locke and his essay concerning human understanding, it is believed that it is ultimately, it is ultimately, uh, the world is seen um, as being outside of us, and we, unless and until our senses are able to apprehend certain developments, we won't have any knowledge. We'll be talking about this in detail when we come to empirical method. Okay, so, but, so this is called knowledge of the conscious. And the conscious has two components to it. One, which is the sense perception component, and the other, which is basically uh, cognition, Cognition. Okay, so the cognition is the other one. But what Kant says is that in a priori rationality, you have a thing called intuition as well. Okay, if you have this thing called intuition, then you are basically able to, without explaining how these your senses have worked, you can know rationally that something is going to happen. Okay, like you can say, I have an intuitive feeling that there will be a war between India and China. Okay, that is an intuition. Just because there is building up of tensions at the border, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to lead to war. But if you say, I have a feeling that war will break out, and if you're a little more specific, that it will break out in, say, 3 days or 5 days or whatever, then that becomes intuition. Okay, and intuition traditionally has been separated from rationality, but Immanuel Kant, his contribution is that he puts the concept of intuit or intuition in a priori rationality. Okay, so that is what we would see in analytics. Now, if we come to the empirical method, now this is the most widely prevalent method in social sciences today. Okay, if you are happy that private universities are coming in and setting up shop, uh, there are not too many of them in Telangana. Um, there are, I think, 5 of them, and most of them are engineering colleges. The other one is a business school. But if you go up north, there are a number of private universities. And all these private universities are owned by big businesses. Now, big businesses want to align social sciences with the needs of business. So I was there in the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. I went on lean from Osmania, which means I was given permission to go to Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And I set up a school for public policy and governance. Now, this is in the area of what we call political science. This is the emerging field. Okay, and already some companies have, just as they have, a CEO, which is a chief executive officer, chief operational officer, chief financial officer. They also have a chief public policy officer. The public policy officer has a team that studies the policies of the government. And if you have been reading the newspapers, especially the business section, you'll see day before yesterday, Toyota came up with a statement saying that they are not actually going to quit the Indian market, but they said the tax regime that exists here is something that is making it very difficult for people to do business in India. And so they are saying that we will not grow anymore. We will not grow anymore because of the fact that the taxes are killing. And if we pass the taxes to the customer, then the products are becoming extremely expensive. They even gave an example from their own products. They said when they launched the Innova, it was 6 plus lakhs, but now it has become 16 plus lakhs in a period of about 14 years. Okay, and they say, so this tax regime is a killer regime. So what these people are saying is we don't want to expand in the Indian market. We'll just maintain a token presence. And anyway, they have tied up with Maruti Suzuki. So the Suzuki Baleno is sold as the Toyota Glanza. And shortly, very shortly, I think it's on the 22nd of September, you will see the launch of the Maruti Vitara Brezza as Toyota Urban Cruiser. Okay, so they said we'll be doing this kind of business. And immediately the Indian government brought a total set of figures about taxation structures, road fees, parking fees, and everything in different parts of the world. And they said, even at our worst, we are only as much as the other countries are. Even if you portray us like this as heavily taxing, we aren't taxing more than other countries are. So this was the response of the Indian government, and Toyota immediately said, no, 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 we didn't mean it that way. Our officer was quoted out of context, and the man who spoke was an Indian, but later on the clarification came from a Japanese officer who said, no, we are committed to India, we want to grow, we will be adding 2,000 crores in the next couple of years. So you see, this is how public policy is growing. Okay, and it's going to be all empirical. Now you must understand what is empirical. If you want to understand empirical, you will have to understand two things. One, which is Plato himself, and the other one is John Locke. Just now I quoted John Locke, and I told you his essay concerning human understanding is of great importance in the modern period. Now, let me quickly tell you what Plato thought of knowledge. Okay, I will not go into the details of it. I'll go into the details of it when we start doing Plato. Plato basically believed that when we are born, we are not born with an empty mind. He believed that we are born with knowledge. Okay, so for him, the ideal world was the real world, which is very different from our conception of ideal and real. We see them as opposites. We see ideal and real as opposites. But in Plato, that which is ideal is the real, because Plato distinguishes between two things. One which he calls the real and the other which he calls the actual. So what is the difference between the real and the actual? The actual is that which is not perfect, okay? And the real is that which is perfect. So he gives two examples. Let me run through them. One is that of a horse, the other is that of a circle. Okay, when he talks about the horse, he basically says which is the perfect horse. Because for Plato, knowledge is perfection. If there is imperfection, then it is not knowledge. What is a perfect horse, or which is a perfect horse? He says any number of horses that you might see, they are not perfect. Something will be amiss. It might be a very small thing, but even that is not acceptable. So what is the perfect horse? The perfect horse for him is the idea of the horse that we carry in our mind. Okay, so we are born with knowledge of what the perfect horse is, right? Similarly, he says you can draw any number of circles, use whatever implements that you want to use. None of these circles are perfect. Incidentally, that is very true. Okay, you can never draw a perfect circle, whatever, however sophisticated your tools may be. You cannot draw a perfect circle. You cannot draw a perfect rhombus. You can't draw any of the geometrical shapes perfectly. Okay, they're bound to have imperfections. So if you look at Plato, he'll say the perfect circle is not the circles that you are drawing, but it is basically the idea of the circle that you have in your head. And this is there right from the time of birth. Okay, he says this particular thing is there right from the time of birth, and therefore we can distinguish between the real and the actual. So the horses that you see are actual horses. The circles that you draw are actual circles. The real circles are those which basically uh, talk about the idea of the horse or a circles. Therefore, the ideal is real. If you come into the beginning of the modern period, John Locke is very rightly considered to be the progenitor of political economy. Okay, uh, Locke does not believe that politics and uh, economics can be separated. So his method is basically something which came to be called political economy. And since it was the first method of political economy, his school of thought in which you also have people like Adam Smith and Thomas Malthus. Uh, if you look at this, and you see that this is called the classical political economy school. Funnily enough, Marx, who disagreed with everything that Locke talked about, also talked about political economy, and therefore his political economy is called the Marxist political economy, which is very different, people say, but I say it is not, but we'll worry about that later, not now. In fact, I'm trying to write a book to say that Marx is not somebody who's very different from the rest of the liberal thinkers, but we'll talk about that later, right? But Marx said he also believed in the idea of a, is somebody putting up something? I'm getting a notification here. Chat? Somebody wants to chat? No? Okay. All right. So we are basically talking about this particular situation wherein Lockean's political economy is classical, then you have the Marxist political economy, and then you also have utilitarian political economy because of the fact that John Stuart Mill also had a system of political economy which is not as powerful, strictly speaking, as either the Marxian or Marxist political economy or the classical political economy. So John Locke is a political economist, no doubt about it, but he's not just that, he's also a philosopher because he wrote this seminal work. I call it seminal because this is the work that defines the modern period, right? He called this work an essay concerning human understanding. Okay, and I really appreciate uh, John Locke and later on John Rawls because both of them, when they wrote their works, they did not use the definitive article. Okay, uh, Locke did not say the essay concerning uh, human understanding. He said an essay, which basically means that there can be other kinds too. And similarly with Rawls, he wrote a theory of justice, not the theory of justice. Okay, which means he's open to the idea that there are other kinds of theories of justice as well. Okay, but what is it that makes an essay concerning human understanding so important? Till then, all ancient civilizations and the medieval civilization in uh, Europe, they were all emphasizing upon what they call inborn knowledge, innate knowledge, which is what I told you, is what you see in Plato. And if you take ancient India, okay, ancient India basically says a bubble, a small, uh, this thing, droplet of water contains the ocean within itself. Okay, a droplet of water contains the ocean within itself. Similarly, as a person, I am like the universe, and therefore the Sanskrit saying Aham Brahmasmi. I'll talk about that when we do a comparison of the ancient Indian and Western political thought. Aham is normally taken as pride. It should not be. Okay, aham is the self. Aham Brahmasmi. Brahmasmi is Brahman. Brahman is the universe. And as for the Indian system, the universe is in itself a living thing. There's nothing dead in the universe. Okay, even grains of sand have soul in them. There's nothing dead. Rocks are not dead. They're all living. Planets are living. The suns and stars, all of them are living as far as the ancient Indians are concerned. So the idea of dhyana, which has unfortunately now everybody talks about meditation as a cure for this, a cure for that. That is not what dhyana is. Dhyana is looking into yourself. Why? If you introspect and understand yourself, then you will understand the universe. Why? Because I am like the universe myself. The same things that constitute the universe constitute me. If capital A plus capital B plus capital C is equal to the universe, then small a plus small b plus small c is equal to me. So I'm a diminished universe, but I'm still a universe. And if I understand myself, then I'll understand what the universe is. Okay, so this is how the ancient Indians looked at it. I told you about Plato. This same thing, again, the Indian principle, you will find in the Christian system, where they believe that all manyness comes out of oneness and returns into that manyness. We'll talk about that in detail when we come to this particular thing called, um, when we talk about Christianity. Okay, that's a part of our syllabus, the church-state controversy. So when the comes, we'll talk about that. Now, what John Locke said is that the universe is constituted or is it is a constitution, not as a document that we write, but it is a constitution of many disparate things. Okay, and he believed like the universe is not contained within our minds, it is outside of us. Everything is outside of us. When we are born with an empty mind. The thing that Locke talked about was that we are born with an empty mind, which is a tabula rasa. Tabula, tabula, rasa, rasa. Now, this is from Latin, and this is from the days before the Chinese invented paper. People used to carve things out on tablets of stone. Okay, so tabula rasa is an empty tablet of stone on which nothing is carved. So what he did is he said that the mind is the tabula rasa. Okay, there's nothing in it when we are born. But the moment we come into this world, our sense perception is that which starts gathering information about the things that are outside of us. Okay, through our five senses. I'm not going to tell you what the five senses are, touch, smell, sight, hearing, feeling, all those things. Okay, so through these senses, we internalize the external world. That is basically what John Locke says. But that is half the story. It is half the story because all your senses could be acting at one time. Then how does your brain make sense of it? Okay, for example, right, you go to a film, you're sitting and watching the movie, you're eating popcorn, you're tasting the popcorn, you're watching the movie. Okay, somebody has sitting next to you has won some kind of deodorant or a perfume. You can smell that. Okay, so all your senses are working together and the brain is making sense of them. How is it making sense of them? That is what John Locke calls uh, cognition. Cognition is the ability of the mind to put together the different inputs that come through the senses and make them cogent and understandable. And this is the basic of the empirical method. The empirical method basically says the world is outside of you. Okay, and if you want to research uh, things, if you want to do things, then you should research the world which is outside of you. Based on this particular, uh, based on this particular uh, theory of Locke's, we find Mark and Avenarius, two Germans, who built the empirical method. They said if you want to know about the world, you have to go out into the world and you have to research whatever you want to. So if you're an oceanographer, you'll go and research the ocean. Okay. If you're a geographer, then you'll go and you'll do research of topography. You'll do research of basically topography and some of the underlying layers of the earth. So you'll do that. If you're a geologist, then you'll go into the research of volcanoes, you'll go into tectonic plates, you'll go into magmatic plates, and you'll try to understand those. So modern notion of science came because of this empirical intervention. But it is not as if the Greeks didn't know about it. Empirical is a Greek word. Okay, there were people, three people about whom I'll tell you later, called the Milesians, and their names are Thales, Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. It's less than a minute, so I'll wind up now. So, empirical method, I'll talk about it for a minute tomorrow. What I'm trying to tell you is empirical method says you have to internalize the external world. Thank you very much for coming. Tomorrow we'll just wind it up in a minute and go to the next slide. Thank you. It's been kind of you, those of you who have come.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.